Okay, hi everyone. I'm so thrilled to be joined by Louis today, and I'm just going to hand straight over to him to introduce himself. He's a really valued colleague. We've known each other for a very long time, and I'm just so glad to be having this conversation about diversity and inclusion. So over to you, Louis.
Oh, thank you so much, Colette. And I'm glad that we've reconnected recently because honestly,
Definitely.
like you have inspired me so many times over the years. So I really appreciate you. For those of you that are watching and don't know who I am, my name is Louis Howell and I do a few different things. So I co-run a social enterprise called Revolution Hive, where our mission is to equip young people for life. So we go into schools, colleges, universities, run workshops and programs on personal development, social responsibility, and global citizenship. And I also do consultancy and training under the brand of 7PK, which is something that I set up recently to really try and drive social mobility for people who are disadvantaged. So we focus on social mobility initiatives, diversity inclusion initiatives, and talent development and youth and community engagement for charities, social enterprises, and corporates. So we design programs, we support with training, those kinds of things. And then outside of my professional life, I also volunteer with an organization, the 100 Black Men of London, doing community mentoring. And I also do chair a couple of boards, and I'm a trustee of a nice little charity down in London as well. So yeah, just trying to do as many good things as possible, Colette. You know me.
It's brilliant. Yeah, very busy man. So first of all, I'm just interested to know what inclusion means to you. And I know it's such a huge topic, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you would interpret inclusion and how much it means to you.
Undoubtedly. I mean, well, here's how I would say I like to define inclusion, as what successful inclusion looks like. And so I always like to say that, and this is something that I do whenever sort of like I'm training or consulting, whatever, is that there are sort of four pillars of what I'd classify as quote unquote justice. And I think justice is the best form of inclusion. So if you consider the fact that inclusion is meant to ensure that people from whatever situation, be that based on background, be that based on gender, be that based on disability, all of the protected characteristics that many of us know about already, have the opportunity to do these four things, then I believe we're being inclusive. So speak, i.e. they actually have a voice to be able to contribute, to be able to share their experiences, to be able to share their beliefs and that kind of thing. So first and foremost, have they got the opportunity to speak within a space? Then it's create. So what I mean by that is, do they have the opportunity to be able to use their skills, their experiences, their ideas, their imagination, whatever it may be, in order to be able to produce something that doesn't already exist within the space to which we're operating? And usually that's within an organization. That could be on a project, on a program, in a community, etc. And then I think there's also an element around economic empowerment, which actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to come to that one last. But the final one I would normally say, but for the sake of this, we're going to make it the third one, is influence. So to what extent can they actually influence? Now, some people might say that means influence change, but actually what I'm saying is just influence full stop. Because what we're talking about there really is equity, right? Do you get what I'm saying? We're talking about being able to balance those power dynamics. So yeah, influence is a big one in my opinion. There's like, to what extent do we ensure that those people from that range of situations that I mentioned earlier have the ability to influence? And then the economic empowerment side is very important, because if we look at it from the standpoint of, we do live in a society, in communities and in organizations, let's be honest, where there's often like an imbalance as it relates to equity. You know, there are inequalities that exist. To what extent do we ensure that there are not economic barriers and or economic challenges to people being able to also then progress, because that is often something that, you know, can cause people to not be able to feel included. So yeah, a long answer, but for me that's how it goes, you know, Colette. But I'm sure you have things that may relate or are similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And inclusion is just so important. I always think that inclusion is important just because it makes all the conversations more interesting and more meaningful. And from that perspective, I know you have a lot of board experience and different sort of types of sort of discussion about inclusion and just kind of bringing lots of different people together. How can charities ensure that inclusion is at the heart of their governance? I'd be really interested to hear your perspectives on that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think, you know, it's interesting. I was speaking about this on a panel just yesterday. And I think what's interesting there is you have to start with an underlying belief system that you are limited if you don't have an inclusive approach to governance. So you have to accept that if you look at your board, if you look at senior leadership, even whatever it may be, and you can clearly see that it's not representative of your community,
Yep.
of the customers and beneficiaries you serve, of wider society, whatever it may be, as soon as you can see that that doesn't exist, then you have to be okay with accepting and assuming that you're at a disadvantage.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, because we are interdependent as people, that means we are interdependent as communities, which means we are interdependent as organizations. So for that purpose, as soon as you see that you lack that, you have to assume you are in a position of disadvantage. Therefore, meaning if you want to get to a point where you can do better work, where you can sustain yourself, where you can improve as an organization, become more resilient, become more innovative, whatever it may be, then diversity and inclusion is critical to your existence. Yes. So as I say, it starts with that underlying belief system. And then in terms of being able to have that play out in practice, I think what comes next really is you then being able to go, okay, cool. Do we have skills and expertise in-house to be able to analyze the different areas of our organization to see where we may actually need to go about making decisions in a different way, which inclusion is a big part of. So sometimes we make decisions just simply based on that, oh, this would be good practice. So for example, be that down to marketing, which is an obvious one, right? Sometimes we may be using language, we may be using imagery, we may be using narratives, we may be, whatever it may be, and not necessarily considering, actually, was this an inclusive approach to doing that? Do you get what I'm saying? Because
absolutely.
For argument's sake, you know, like if you're using language when marketing an opportunity, when marketing a program, when trying to communicate what you believe in, but you lack the input from people who have various different experiences, then what might end up happening is you have those cultural faux pas, you have those, you know, like you have those interpersonal relationships get damaged because of the fact that you didn't actually have an understanding of what other people's experiences may have caused them to perceive your marketing as. And that also relates to, you know, when you're also thinking about developing new partnerships, that relates to when you're looking to engage with potential funders, that there's so many elements of inclusion that will affect your day-to-day running operation and the sustainability of your organization. So it's about being able to analyze those things within your decision making, because that's what it comes down to, really.
Completely, and it shows real integrity for an organization as well. And I just, because there's no organization that's going to say they don't want to be diverse, but like you say, there are so many ways that you could get it slightly wrong or feel anxious about doing it in the right way. And do you think that inclusion will always, an inclusive approach will always lead to diversity, or do you think it's the start of a journey?
Well, that's a good question, you know, Colette, because I think it is usually an outcome, in my opinion. I think trying to be inclusive does usually lead to the outcome of increased diversity. And I think what's interesting there is, as we said before, if you see inclusion as an opportunity to get as much input from as wide a range of people as possible, then by rights, you'll probably find that you do become more diverse. But then what's interesting there again is what we classify as diverse, because as you and I would both know, sometimes diversity in terms of representation doesn't always necessarily mean that there is a balance of equity, because you know, we've seen it, and this isn't always necessarily the case, I think, for charities that are a little bit smaller, but we see it a lot of times in larger organizations where the figures may say they are diverse due to having people from various different backgrounds, gender, sexual orientations, all of those kinds of things. But if those individuals who are from those underrepresented backgrounds are only at the lower levels in an organization, is that helpful? We don't know. Do you know what I mean? Because we're here talking about board level, we're talking about governance, but if everybody's only in a junior level role or in a coordinator level role and can't make it to manage, to, you know, management, to directorship, to board, to whatever, then actually, how effective has our approach to inclusion and diversity been? So does it always lead to diversity? You'd hope so. But then I think, again, it goes back to that accountability of to what extent is there a spread across the organization of those individuals as it comes to getting closer and closer to leadership?
Yeah, that's such an interesting way of sort of thinking about it, and the idea that I guess there's the danger of starting that process if it doesn't keep momentum, of it remaining as tokenistic diversity. So that's a really, really interesting way of thinking about it, and it's just so great to get your perspectives. Are there any other sort of thoughts that you have that you'd like to sort of, this conversation could go on for so long, but just to kind of get you sort of closing thoughts, is there anything that you'd like organizations to sort of take from this, and as sort of closing thoughts, next steps, any final messages you'd like to get across?
Undoubtedly, look, I just want to say first and foremost that I understand that if this is something that your organization hasn't done much of before,
Yep.
or for example, didn't have a strong strategy in place, and you are concerned that you may make a mistake, I just want you to know that, listen, this is a journey.
Yep.
Like, don't be afraid to
Yes.
try new things. Like, ask questions, as opposed to trying to do something, making a mistake, and then never doing it again. Ask questions, seek support, seek input. You've got people like yourself, Colette, who are always there to try and help organizations to improve. Do you get what I'm saying? Myself included, other colleagues we have, all of us are here to try and support organizations. But the key thing is this: try to move in the right direction. But if you are concerned that you will make a mistake, and therefore that is meaning that you're not doing anything, that's dangerous, because we've just endured a pandemic which has seen people who are, often in disadvantaged situations. We've also, seen the amount of attention that the Black Lives Matter movement has got, which means, again, people who are usually in positions of disadvantage have it's been now made aware to people that, no, we need to do something. So if you're silent, silence is loud now. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's better you are doing something, because silence is loud now. Do you know what I mean? So effectively what I'm saying is, don't be afraid to try and move in the right direction. You won't make too many mistakes. You'll be okay. It will be fine. So that would be my key piece of advice. And then going on from that is, if you lack the skills in-house, the experience in-house to be able to do it, look for the external input and support that's available.
That's wonderful. I love that. Silence is really loud, and just don't be afraid to ask questions. I think that's an absolutely brilliant place to end the conversation. And I really look forward to talking to you again soon. And thanks so much for your time and expertise.